Salt was never created to blend in. It was never designed to be invisible, unnoticed, or irrelevant. Salt was made to stand out, to be distinct, to make a difference wherever it is placed. It has a unique assignment, a divine reason for existing, and it fulfills that purpose the moment it comes into contact with anything else. Salt is not neutral, it is not passive, it is not ordinary. Its presence changes everything. When it touches food, the taste changes. When it is placed in an environment, its influence is felt. It cannot be hidden in the sense of its effect being erased, because it was created with a nature that demands impact. In the same way, you were never created to blend in. You were not placed on this earth to be a carbon copy of someone else, to live a life that looks like everyone else's, or to suppress your uniqueness so you can be accepted. Blending in is the beginning of dying before your time, because it is the burial of your identity. Salt that blends in loses its reason for existing. If salt were to look like sugar, act like sugar, taste like sugar, it would no longer be salt. Its essence would be compromised, and it would no longer fulfill its purpose. Many people today have traded in their true identity for an imitation version of themselves that society approves of. They have exchanged authenticity for acceptability. They have abandoned uniqueness for uniformity. They have silenced their voice to fit the echo of the crowd. But salt was never made for that. Salt was made to be different in taste, texture, and effect. It was made to be noticed not for the sake of attention, but for the sake of transformation. The tragedy of life is not that you die, it is that you die without ever having lived as who you really are. Mediocrity begins the day you start pretending to be something you're not so that people will like you. It begins the day you start dimming your light so that others don't feel uncomfortable around you. It begins the day you surrender your originality so you can fit into the mold of the majority. But your Creator never designed you for that mold. In fact, you were shaped in such a way that you could never truly fit in without losing the very thing that makes you valuable. When salt loses its savor, it becomes worthless, thrown out, and trampled underfoot. Likewise, when you lose your distinctiveness, when you compromise your values, when you mute your voice, you forfeit the very influence you were given to change your world. There is a reason why salt has been treasured throughout history. In ancient times, salt was more valuable than gold in certain regions because of its power to preserve and to flavor. It was never just an accessory, it was a necessity. Without salt, food decayed faster. Without salt, meals lacked taste. Without salt, preservation was impossible. That is how vital you are when you live in your true essence. Your presence adds value. Your contribution preserves truth, goodness, and integrity in a decaying world. Your gift flavors life with hope, inspiration, and possibility. But when you choose to blend in, when you hide your saltiness, you allow decay to spread unchecked, and you rob the world of the flavor it desperately needs. Salt cannot fulfill its purpose unless it comes in contact with what needs its influence. You were placed in this generation, in your family, in your community, in your field of work for a reason. You are meant to bring a difference in thinking, in standards, in creativity, in excellence. But if you blend in with the complacency around you, you become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. The crowd will always invite you to blend in because your distinctiveness makes them uncomfortable. Your excellence exposes their laziness. Your vision reveals their lack of purpose. Your courage reminds them of their fears. But you were never created to seek their comfort. You were created to fulfill your assignment, and that requires you to remain salty, to keep your edge, your flavor, your boldness, and your uniqueness intact no matter the cost. To blend in is to betray your design. You have to understand that blending in is not humility, it is disobedience to your purpose. True humility is knowing exactly who you are and choosing to serve others with it. Salt never apologizes for being salty. It simply does what it was made to do. It doesn't hide in fear of overpowering the food. It enhances it. It doesn't pretend to be something else to gain approval. It knows its value. You must reach the point where you are unapologetic about your calling, your gift, and your identity. Not arrogant, not boastful, but confident in the fact that you are fulfilling exactly what you were sent here to do. Think of the ocean. It contains an endless amount of salt, and because of that, it has a distinct taste that cannot be mistaken for anything else. It does not try to taste like a river or a lake. It does not dilute itself to be palatable for those who prefer something bland. Its saltiness is part of its identity, and because it remains true to itself, it sustains life in a way that no other body of water can. The same is true for you. When you embrace your uniqueness, when you refuse to compromise your essence, you create an environment where life can thrive around you. People are drawn to authenticity, even if they resist it at first, because deep down, the human spirit craves what is real. Blending in is easy. It requires no courage, no conviction, and no responsibility. Standing out takes courage because it often means standing alone. It means being willing to walk away from the crowd, to endure misunderstanding, to be talked about, to be criticized, and yet remain steadfast in your purpose. It means understanding that influence comes with the price of difference. If you want to be like everyone else, you will never influence anyone. Salt that loses its saltiness has no impact, no effect, and no relevance. It becomes invisible, disposable, and forgotten. But salt that remains true to itself cannot be ignored. Even in small quantities, its effect is undeniable. You were never called to live a life where your presence makes no difference. If your presence or absence in a place changes nothing, you are blending in too much. When salt is in the food, it is impossible to ignore its effect, and when you live in your full identity, it is impossible for your environment to remain the same. That is why mediocrity is such a curse. It convinces you that average is acceptable, that comfort is enough, that fitting in is safer than standing out. But safety is not the goal, purpose is. Salt was created for impact, and impact requires risk. It requires stepping into spaces where your influence will be felt, even if not everyone likes it. Your uniqueness is not a weakness. It is your greatest strength. It is the key to breaking the pattern of sameness that traps so many in mediocrity. Every time you choose to blend in, you bury your treasure in the ground. But every time you choose to stand out, to use your gift, to speak your truth, to walk in your calling, you invest that treasure into the world, and it multiplies in its effect. The goal is not to be different for the sake of being different. It is to be exactly who you were created to be, without compromise, without dilution, without apology. Salt was never made to blend in, and neither were you. Mediocrity is the silent killer of destiny. It does not arrive with a loud announcement, nor does it demand immediate attention. It creeps in quietly, dressing itself in the garments of comfort, safety, and convenience. It whispers to you that what you are doing is good enough, that there is no need to push further, no reason to demand more of yourself, no point in stretching beyond the boundaries of the familiar. Mediocrity is subtle because it does not come to destroy your life in an instant. It comes to slowly drain it of purpose until you find yourself existing without truly living. The greatest enemy of greatness is not failure. Failure at least proves you tried, that you reach for something beyond your current level. Failure carries with it lessons, resilience, and the seeds of future success. Mediocrity, on the other hand, robs you of even the attempt. It keeps you in a place where you never risk enough to fail, never dare enough to grow, and never care enough to strive for excellence. It convinces you that where you are is where you belong, even when your spirit knows there is more. Salt that loses its savor is not destroyed violently, it simply becomes irrelevant. It remains physically present but is stripped of its influence, its power, its necessity. Mediocrity does the same to your life. It allows you to remain, but without meaning, without impact, without fulfillment. Mediocrity thrives in environments where there is no vision. When you lose sight of the reason you were created, you settle for whatever is easiest. You stop questioning whether your actions align with your destiny, and instead begin to measure success by the standards of the crowd. You look around, see that you are doing slightly better than others, and convince yourself that it is enough. But being better than average is not the same as fulfilling your purpose. The salt in a meal may be more flavorful than the blandest dish you have ever tasted, but if it has lost its true potency, it still fails in its assignment. One of the most dangerous aspects of mediocrity is that it feels comfortable. It offers you stability without challenge, security without growth. It allows you to avoid the discomfort of change and the risk of failure. But every comfort zone eventually becomes a prison, and mediocrity is the warden that keeps you there. It does not chain your body, it chains your ambition, your imagination, your courage. It keeps you alive but not awake. You wake up, go through routines, perform tasks, and pass time, but you do not create, you do not lead, you do not transform. Salt that has lost its savor can still look like salt, but it can no longer fulfill its true function. Likewise, a mediocre life can still look respectable from the outside, but it carries no true flavor, no true preservation, no true impact. Mediocrity does not only affect individuals, it affects entire communities and nations. When a group of people collectively decide that good enough is sufficient, innovation dies, leadership weakens, and moral standards decay. The moment people stop striving for excellence, the decay begins. Salt is a preservative. It protects from decay, But when it loses its power, rot sets in quickly. The curse of mediocrity is not just personal, it is generational. It is passed down in habits, in attitudes, in the silent acceptance of less than what is possible. It teaches children to settle for the minimum, to avoid the fight for greatness, to choose safety over vision. The silent nature of mediocrity makes it more dangerous than open opposition. An enemy you can see is easier to resist. You know it is coming for you. But mediocrity disguises itself as reasonableness. It tells you that your dreams are too big, that your standards are too high, that you should be content with what you have because others have less. It makes you feel noble for lowering your expectations, as though compromise is a sign of maturity. But maturity is not about lowering your vision to match your circumstances. It is about elevating your actions to match your vision. Salt that remains potent does not lower its flavor to match the blandness around it. It transforms whatever it touches. You can recognize mediocrity by its fruits. It produces work that is passable but never excellent. It fosters relationships that are tolerable but never deeply fulfilling. It breeds habits that maintain but never advance. It creates lives that are predictable but never inspiring. It resists change, shuns risk, and fears challenge. It celebrates completion over quality and comfort over growth. It tells you that arriving is more important than arriving well. But purpose demands more than arrival. It demands excellence in the journey. The curse of mediocrity is that it allows you to arrive at destinations far below your potential, all the while convincing you that you have done enough. Mediocrity does not care about your starting point. It cares about your stopping point. It is not about where you are. It is about how far you are willing to go. Many start with passion, determination, and vision, but somewhere along the way they accept less. They stop striving because striving is tiring. They stop pushing because pushing is painful. They stop believing because believing requires fighting. And so they settle, not because they could not do more, but because they convince themselves that what they have is all they need. But salt that has lost its savor does not regain it by being content. It regains it by returning to its original source, by reclaiming its essence. If you allow mediocrity to remain in your life, it will become your normal. What once felt unacceptable will begin to feel comfortable. What once stirred dissatisfaction will now pass without notice. You will stop questioning your lack of progress, stop desiring better, stop envisioning greater. This is the slow death that mediocrity brings. It robs you of urgency. It kills your hunger. It blinds you to opportunities. It makes you content with surviving instead of thriving. And in this state, destiny is quietly strangled until there is nothing left but a shadow of what could have been. The truth is that greatness is not reserved for a chosen few. It is available to all who refuse to settle. The difference between a life of influence and a life of mediocrity is not talent, not resources, not opportunity. It is hunger. It is the refusal to accept the ordinary when the extraordinary is possible. It is the commitment to give your best when no one is watching, to strive for excellence even when mediocrity is rewarded, to remain salty even when the world around you has gone bland. The salt that retains its savor is valuable in any generation, in any place, in any culture. And so is the person who refuses to bow to the comfort of mediocrity. The danger of mediocrity is that it does not just waste your potential, it wastes your influence. Your life was meant to touch others, to inspire them, to lift them higher. But when you settle for less, you deny the people connected to your destiny the example they need. You withhold the inspiration that could have ignited someone else's greatness. Just as salt's absence allows food to spoil, your absence from the arena of excellence allows decay to spread in the spaces you were meant to preserve. Every time you choose mediocrity, you not only limit yourself, you fail those who are counting on your light to guide them. This is why mediocrity is the silent killer of destiny. It does not destroy you in a dramatic collapse. It simply lulls you into a life where you never rise to meet the height of your calling. It lets you live comfortably while keeping you far from the extraordinary life you were designed to experience. It robs you slowly, quietly, effectively, until you have nothing left but the memory of what you could have been. And by the time you realize it, the years are gone, the opportunities have passed, and the flavor of your life has been diluted beyond recognition. Salt is a covenant symbol of preservation. From the earliest civilizations, salt has carried a meaning far deeper than seasoning food. In ancient cultures, salt was not just a culinary ingredient, it was a sacred emblem, a seal of agreements, and a sign of unbreakable promises. When two parties entered into a covenant, they would often exchange salt as a declaration that the agreement would last, that it would not decay, and that it would endure the tests of time. Salt was a reminder that what is preserved remains unspoiled, protected from the slow corruption that time and environment try to bring. In the same way, your life was meant to be preserved from the decay of mediocrity, from the erosion of vision, from the slow rot of compromise. In the natural world, salt protects from spoilage. Long before refrigeration existed, people understood that salt had the power to keep meat and fish from rotting. Salt penetrates the flesh, halting the spread of bacteria, creating an environment where decay cannot advance. Without it, what is fresh will eventually decompose. This is the exact image of what happens to your purpose when you allow mediocrity to rule. It decays. The vision that was once fresh begins to fade. The dreams that once stirred your heart begin to wither. The passion that once kept you awake at night slowly dies. But when you live with the covenant of salt, when you commit yourself to preserving your identity, your integrity, and your standards, you stop that process of decay before it ever takes hold. Salt's preserving power works because it permeates deeply. It does not sit on the surface and hope to influence what's beneath. It seeps in until every fiber is affected. In the same way, preservation of your purpose is not a surface-level decision. It is not about momentary bursts of motivation or occasional commitments. It is about allowing your values, your convictions, and your discipline to penetrate every area of your life. Your relationships, your work ethic, your words, your thoughts. All of them must be infused with that preserving power. When the covenant of salt is active in your life, it does not allow you to separate your personal character from your public actions. It demands consistency. It keeps you from rotting in private while pretending to shine in public. This covenant of preservation also carries a message of endurance. Salt does not just keep food from spoiling for a few hours. It can preserve it for months or even years if applied properly. This is a picture of the kind of life you are meant to live, a life that remains potent and impactful through the passing of time. Too many people begin with passion but cannot sustain it. They burn brightly for a moment and then fade into irrelevance because they lack the discipline to preserve what they started. The covenant of salt demands that you do not just start well but finish well. It demands that you guard the flavor of your purpose against the erosion of complacency. It requires that you fight to keep your standards high even when the world lowers theirs. In the ancient world, salt was so valuable that it was sometimes used as currency. This is where the phrase, "worth his salt," comes from. It was a statement of a person's value and reliability. When you live in a way that preserves truth, excellence, and integrity, your worth in the eyes of those around you increases, not because you seek their approval, but because you are rare. In a world that is quick to decay morally, spiritually, and ethically, the one who remains preserved becomes a standard, a reference point, a benchmark. Your life becomes a reminder of what is possible when someone refuses to let mediocrity corrupt them. Just as preserved food carries the taste of freshness even after time has passed, your life will carry the freshness of vision and impact long after others have given in to the blandness of average living. Salt also represents faithfulness in this covenant imagery. When God made covenants with his people in ancient times, he sometimes referred to them as covenants of salt, meaning they were to be everlasting, unwavering, and incorruptible. The salt symbolized that the promise would not dissolve, fade, or be altered by changing circumstances. In the same way, your commitment to your calling must be sealed with salt. It must be unshakable, not dependent on convenience, not swayed by difficulty, and not compromised by the opinions of others. A preserved life is one that refuses to let temporary discomfort dictate permanent direction. Preservation is not just about protecting what you have. It is about maintaining the original intent and quality. If salt keeps food from rotting, but allows its flavor to remain unchanged, then living under the covenant of preservation means keeping the purity of your gift intact while still expressing it to the fullest. It means not allowing the pressures of the world to dilute your originality. It means keeping the truth untainted even when lies are more popular. It means holding on to excellence even when shortcuts seem more profitable. Preservation is a choice that must be renewed daily because every day forces will try to corrode your commitment. You cannot preserve what you do not value. People do not waste salt on what they consider worthless. In the same way, if you have not yet realized the worth of your own destiny, you will not fight to protect it. You will let mediocrity creep in, you will let excuses pile up, and you will let your vision spoil. But when you understand that your life carries a unique assignment, that your gift was given for a reason, you will guard it like a treasure. You will refuse to place yourself in environments that corrode your purpose. You will avoid relationships that drain your saltiness. You will reject habits that invite decay. Preservation requires intentionality. It is the daily decision to keep your life aligned with the flavor and potency it was given at the beginning. Salt does its work quietly. It does not announce its presence loudly, yet its absence is always felt. You rarely notice salt when it is doing its job, but you immediately notice when it is missing. A preserved life is similar. You may not always be celebrated for your consistency, your discipline, or your integrity, but without them, everything else falls apart. The world may overlook the quiet preservers, the parents who raise their children with strong values, the leaders who maintain high standards in hidden places, the individuals who resist corruption when no one is watching, but their influence is profound. They are the reason the world has not fallen completely into decay. They are the salt that holds things together. The covenant of preservation also speaks to the idea of resisting corruption from the inside out. Salt does not stop decay by building a barrier around food. It works by changing the internal environment so that decay cannot thrive. In your life, this means transformation must happen within. You cannot rely solely on external rules, systems, or appearances to keep you from mediocrity. You must allow the preserving power of purpose, vision, and conviction to transform your inner life. Your thoughts must be seasoned with truth. Your heart must be infused with integrity. Your will must be strengthened with commitment. Only then can you resist the slow, quiet erosion that mediocrity brings. Salt never forgets what it is, no matter how much time passes. It does not weaken with age, it remains salt. This is a powerful picture of what it means to live preserved. You remain true to your essence regardless of seasons, challenges, or changes in culture. You do not lose your identity because trends shift. You do not lower your standards because the world does. You do not dilute your gift because it is not immediately celebrated. You remain salty. You remain effective. You remain committed to the covenant that you made with your purpose from the very beginning. When you live with this understanding, you carry yourself differently. You understand that you are not here just to survive another day. You are here to preserve something valuable, something eternal, something that will impact generations. You realize that your choices today are not just about you, they are about what remains after you. Salt was used in sacrifices, in offerings, in covenants, not because of its taste alone, but because it represented permanence. What you preserve today will shape what others inherit tomorrow. And when you decide to keep your life seasoned with that covenant of salt, you not only protect yourself from mediocrity, you ensure that the flavor of your influence will last long after you are gone. Influence is the nature of salt. Salt does not negotiate its effect. It does not seek permission to do what it was designed to do. The moment it makes contact with food, the taste changes. It does not need to announce itself. It does not require applause. It does not ask for validation. It simply fulfills its purpose. That is the power of influence. It is not always loud, but it is always felt. Influence is about presence, and presence is about impact. When you live true to your identity, when you refuse to dilute who you are, you cannot help but influence the environment you enter. You were created with that same built-in nature. Whether you realize it or not, your life is seasoning the world around you. Your words, your actions, your choices, your attitude, all of them are releasing either flavor or blandness into your surroundings. Salt transforms whatever it touches. It takes something ordinary and makes it remarkable. A meal without salt can be nutritious, it can be filling, but it will lack the element that brings satisfaction. In the same way, your influence is meant to take what is present in the world around you and elevate it. When you step into a conversation, ideas should be sharpened. When you join a team, excellence should rise. When you enter a room, the atmosphere should shift. This is not arrogance. It is the natural effect of living in the fullness of your calling. Influence is not about control or dominance. It is about impact. It is the ability to bring out the best in people, to lift standards, to awaken potential, to preserve truth. The danger is that influence works both ways. Just as salt can enhance, it can also harm if it is corrupted. Too much salt can ruin a meal. Impure salt can carry a bitter taste. Likewise, the influence of a life that has compromised its values can bring harm to those it touches. Influence is inevitable. You cannot stop influencing. But the quality of that influence depends entirely on your integrity and authenticity. This is why remaining true to your essence is not just about personal fulfillment, it is about responsibility. Your influence is shaping people whether you see it or not. Someone is learning from your example, imitating your habits, adopting your standards. The question is not whether you are influencing but what kind of influence you are releasing. Salt works silently but powerfully. You do not need to see it to know it is there. You simply taste the result. Influence is the same. You may never know how many lives your words, your decisions, or your example have touched. A single act of kindness, a consistent display of integrity, a moment of courage. These can leave an imprint on someone's heart for years without you ever realizing it. Influence is not always about public recognition. Often, it is about private transformation. The teacher who inspires a student, the leader who models excellence, the parent who instills values. These are all examples of influence that may never make headlines but will shape generations. Salt also demonstrates that influence is not about quantity but quality. You do not need a large amount of salt to change the flavor of a dish. Just a pinch can transform it. This means you do not need a massive platform or worldwide visibility to make an impact. Influence is not measured by the size of your audience, but by the depth of your effect. A single person living with purpose, integrity, and conviction can alter the course of an entire community. History is filled with examples of individuals whose influence reached far beyond their immediate circle because they remained true to their essence. They did not try to be everything to everyone. They simply stayed salty and the world took notice. What makes salt so effective is its willingness to dissolve into what it touches. It gives of itself to bring change. Influence requires the same willingness. You cannot influence without investment. You cannot change lives from a distance. You must be willing to step into the spaces that need your flavor, to give of your time, your wisdom, your skill, your heart. Influence is not about standing above people and directing them. It is about walking among them and seasoning their lives with what you carry. The more you give, the more you leave behind a lasting taste that others cannot forget. Influence also resists passivity. Just as salt cannot be placed into food without affecting it, you cannot step into your world without leaving a mark, unless you have allowed yourself to lose your savor. A person who has compromised their values, silenced their convictions, and hidden their uniqueness will blend into the environment without changing it. That is the tragedy of lost influence. You may still be present, but your presence no longer shifts anything. You become like salt that has been left exposed to moisture, clumped together, and rendered useless. Influence requires that you guard your distinctiveness, that you remain intentional about your effect on others, that you resist the temptation to fit in at the expense of your impact. True influence is not about forcing change, but inspiring it. Salt does not fight the food to make it taste different. It simply interacts with it in such a way that transformation happens naturally. When you live with authenticity, when you walk in excellence, when you maintain integrity, you do not need to force people to change. Your life becomes a living example that draws them to a higher standard. Influence is about attraction, not coercion. It is the light that draws people out of darkness, the example that makes them want to do better, the consistency that makes them believe better is possible. Salt's influence is lasting. Long after the meal is gone, the memory of its flavor remains. Influence leaves a similar imprint. Long after you have left a room, people remember how you made them feel, the words you spoke, the standards you upheld. Influence is not about momentary effect. It is about creating a legacy. Every day your actions are seasoning your future reputation. Every choice you make is adding to the taste you will leave behind. This is why influence must be intentional. If you do not deliberately choose the kind of influence you want to have, you will drift into patterns that leave an aftertaste you did not intend. The nature of salt reminds us that influence cannot remain hidden forever. Even if you try to blend in, your true essence will eventually reveal itself. Influence leaks out of you through your habits, your decisions, your responses under pressure. You may think no one is paying attention, but influence has a way of reaching eyes you did not know were watching. This is why private integrity is just as important as public conduct. If your life is consistent in both hidden and visible places, your influence will be pure, trustworthy, and lasting. But if you live one way in public and another in private, the inconsistency will eventually corrode your influence, no matter how long it takes. Influence is not about being perfect. It is about being authentic and intentional. Just as salt has imperfections yet still fulfills its purpose, you do not have to be flawless to make a difference. What matters is that you remain true to your design, that you do not allow fear, doubt, or compromise to strip away your savor. When you live with this kind of intentionality, you will find that influence is not something you chase. It is something you naturally release. You become a carrier of flavor, a preserver of truth, a bringer of transformation. Everywhere you go, something changes. not because you demand it, but because it is your nature. The world is filled with environments that have lost their flavor. Families have become bland in their values, workplaces in their standards, communities in their vision. The absence of influence has left many spaces tasteless and without life. You carry the ability to change that. You are the salt that can restore the flavor, preserve what is good, and awaken what has grown stale. But you can only do this if you embrace your nature, if you live fully as who you are, if you allow your uniqueness to touch everything you encounter. Influence is not optional. It is your built-in design. The only question is whether your influence will enhance or diminish, preserve or corrupt, inspire or discourage. The choice is yours, but the effect will always reach farther than you can see. The curse of mediocrity is broken the moment you rediscover who you are and refuse to dilute your identity for acceptance. Everything changes when you awaken to the truth that you were never created to be a lesser version of yourself just to fit into spaces that were never designed to contain you. The tragedy for many is not that they lack potential, but that they have buried it under layers of fear, compromise, and the need for approval. From the time you were a child, you carried a unique design, a specific sound, a flavor that no one else could replicate. Somewhere along the way, life began to apply pressure. Voices told you to be realistic. Experiences told you to protect yourself from disappointment. Society told you to fit in. And slowly, you began to dilute the essence that made you different. The breaking of mediocrity begins when you strip away those layers and return to your original flavor. Rediscovering who you are is not about creating a new identity. It is about reclaiming the one you were born with. This is why so many people feel restless, even when they seem successful, because success without authenticity is still bondage. You can achieve titles, earn wealth, gain recognition, and still feel empty if you have had to compromise yourself to get there. When salt loses its savor, it may still look like salt, but its true nature has been altered. Likewise, you may still look like you, sound like you, even act like you, but if your life has been diluted by compromise, you are not operating at your true potency. The rediscovery process requires honesty, an unflinching look at where you have been pretending, where you have been silent when you should have spoken, where you have been shrinking when you should have expanded. Acceptance is one of the most seductive traps of mediocrity. It offers you belonging at the cost of authenticity. It whispers that it is better to be liked for who you pretend to be than to be rejected for who you truly are. But true belonging is not about being accepted by everyone. It is about being aligned with those who celebrate your true self. Every time you dilute your identity to keep someone comfortable, you are training yourself to live in mediocrity. You are telling yourself that approval is worth more than purpose, that peace in the crowd is worth more than the fulfillment of your calling. But the truth is, the crowd will never be satisfied for long. The moment you can no longer give them what they want, they will turn to someone else. The only lasting foundation you have is the unshakable conviction of knowing who you are and living in that truth regardless of who approves. When you rediscover your true identity, something shifts inside you. You begin to see that your differences are not flaws to be corrected, but strengths to be cultivated. You understand that your unique perspective, your way of thinking, your creativity, your voice, your skill set, all of these were given to you for a reason. You stop seeing your life as something to be compared to others and start seeing it as something to be stewarded. Salt does not compare itself to sugar. It simply does what it was made to do. In the same way, you no longer waste energy trying to measure up to someone else's standard. You focus on releasing the flavor that only you can bring. Refusing to dilute your identity also means setting boundaries. You cannot remain salty if you constantly pour yourself into environments that demand you to be bland. There are relationships, jobs, and social circles that will only accept you as long as you are willing to tone yourself down. Breaking the curse of mediocrity requires the courage to walk away from places that require you to lose yourself in order to stay. This does not mean you isolate yourself or refuse to connect. It means you protect your essence. Just as salt loses its flavor when exposed to certain conditions, you lose your potency when you allow yourself to be constantly surrounded by influences that drain your authenticity. The process of rediscovery also forces you to confront fear. Many people know who they are deep down, but are afraid of the cost of living it out. They fear losing relationships, opportunities, or comfort. They fear criticism, rejection, and misunderstanding. But fear is the fuel of mediocrity. It keeps you in the safe zone, far from the risk that greatness demands. You cannot reclaim your flavor without confronting the fear that has kept you bland. The moment you decide that living fully as yourself is worth any cost, fear loses its power. Salt is bold, it is unapologetic in its presence. It does not ask if the dish is ready for it. It simply enhances it. You must live with that same boldness, unafraid to bring the full strength of who you are to every space you enter. Breaking the curse of mediocrity is not about being loud for the sake of being loud or different for the sake of being different. It is about alignment. It is about living in a way where your actions, your words, your choices, and your relationships all align with your true nature. The power of salt lies in its consistency. No matter where it is still salt. The same must be true of you. You cannot be one person in private and another in public, one person at work and another at home, one person with friends and another when alone. Authenticity is not situational. It is constant. This kind of consistency builds trust, and trust multiplies influence. The moment you reclaim your identity, you will notice a change in the way you approach life. Mediocrity thrives in uncertainty and passivity, but rediscovery brings clarity and intentionality. You begin to set higher standards for yourself. You no longer tolerate average effort, average thinking, or average results. Not because you are trying to be perfect, but because you understand that anything less than your best is a betrayal of who you are. Your work ethic shifts because you are no longer working to impress others. You are working to express your true self. Your relationships shift because you are no longer drawn to people who want to mold you into their comfort. You are drawn to people who call out the best in you. Your environment shifts because you are no longer content to stay in places that cannot handle your full flavor. One of the most powerful effects of rediscovering who you are is the liberation it brings. Mediocrity feels like captivity because it forces you to live in a role that does not fit you. You may survive in that role, but you will never thrive. When you break free from it, you experience the freedom of movement, expression, and creativity that comes with authenticity. You stop trying to meet expectations that were never yours to carry. You stop performing for approval. You stop negotiating your worth. You start living with a confidence that is not arrogant, but deeply rooted in truth. That confidence changes how you walk, how you speak, how you make decisions. It changes the energy you bring into every room. It changes how people respond to you because they can sense that you are no longer pretending. The curse of mediocrity is powerless against someone who knows who they are and refuses to compromise it. Mediocrity depends on conformity. It thrives when people are willing to trade uniqueness for sameness. But when you refuse to dilute your identity, you remove yourself from its grip entirely. You become like salt that is protected, preserved, and potent. Your presence brings change. Your words carry weight. Your actions inspire. And even in environments where blandness has reigned for years, your flavor begins to awaken something fresh. That is the transformative power of rediscovery. It not only breaks the curse in your own life, but it challenges the mediocrity in others simply by existing as proof that there is another way to live. Salt in a container changes nothing. No matter how pure, how potent, or how valuable it is, if it stays sealed away, it never fulfills its purpose. Its potential to season, to preserve, to transform is wasted as long as it remains unused. The same is true for your life. You can be full of talent, rich with ideas, overflowing with vision. Yet if you never release what you carry, the world will remain unaffected by your existence. Potential that is never expressed benefits no one, not even you. There is no reward for salt that stays on the shelf. Its value is only realized when it is poured out into something that needs it. The tragedy of many lives is not that they lacked what was needed to make an impact, but that they never released it. They stayed in the safety of the container. They hid behind fear, procrastination, excuses, and doubt. They waited for perfect timing, for the approval of others, for conditions to be ideal before they acted. And while they waited, their purpose sat untouched. Salt has no impact in the jar. It only changes its environment when it makes contact. You were not created to be preserved for your own comfort. You were created to be poured out for the benefit of others. Pouring yourself out requires vulnerability. When salt leaves the container, it can no longer control where it lands or how it will be received. It has to trust that its presence will make the difference it was designed to make. Many people never pour themselves out because they fear that what they have will not be appreciated or that it will be wasted. But the value of salt is not diminished by where it falls. It remains salt no matter the environment. In the same way, your value is not determined by how people respond to you. It is determined by the truth of who you are and the purpose you carry. The act of releasing your gift, your words, your ideas, your service is powerful, whether it is celebrated or ignored. Salt also teaches us that influence requires dispersion. If you dump salt in one spot and leave the rest of the dish untouched, the flavor will be unbalanced. To make the whole meal better, the salt must be spread. Your life is not meant to be locked into one safe corner where you affect only a few. Your purpose is meant to be spread into multiple areas: your family, your work, your community, your relationships. You cannot fulfill your destiny by hoarding your skills or limiting your impact to places that feel comfortable. You must be willing to step into spaces that stretch you, to reach people you have never met, to touch lives you will never see again. Remaining in the container can feel secure, but it is a false security. Salt that sits too long in one place can clump together, absorbing moisture from the air until it is difficult to use. It loses its ability to flow freely. The same thing happens to a life that is never poured out. It becomes stagnant, rigid, and resistant to movement. Fear hardens it, comfort stiffens it, routine locks it in place. Breaking free from the container is not just about blessing others, it is about keeping yourself alive, vibrant, and growing. You were designed to function in motion, to remain active in your purpose, to continually give out what you have been given. Pouring yourself out is an act of faith. You do not get to see the full impact of your actions immediately. Salt disappears into the food. It dissolves, becoming part of the whole, but its effect is undeniable. You may never see the full scope of how your life has touched others, but that does not mean your contribution was wasted. Sometimes the difference you make will only be realized years later, when someone remembers something you said, an example you set, or an act of kindness you gave. The reward is in knowing you were faithful to release what you carried. There is also a danger in waiting for the perfect opportunity to pour yourself out. If you are constantly waiting for a grand stage, a huge platform, or an ideal moment, you will miss countless opportunities to make a difference where you are right now. Salt does not wait for a feast to be useful. It can enhance the smallest, simplest meal. Your gift does not have to be unleashed only in extraordinary circumstances. It can and should be used in everyday moments. A conversation, a small act of service, a gesture of encouragement, all of these are ways to season the world around you. The size of the action does not determine the size of the impact. The act of being poured out also demands that you do not hold back the best of what you have. Some people give only a small portion of themselves, holding the rest in reserve in case they need it later. But salt that is rationed too carefully cannot do its job fully. When you hold back your best ideas, your best energy, your best creativity, you rob the moment of its fullest potential. You were designed to give your all in every season, trusting that as you pour out, you will be replenished. Life has a way of refilling those who give generously of themselves, but the flow cannot begin until you start releasing what you have. Another truth about pouring yourself out is that it will not always be comfortable. Sometimes you will be poured into places you would not have chosen. Salt cannot decide which dish it wants to season. It simply goes where it is needed. You may find yourself in environments that feel unfamiliar, challenging, or even resistant to your presence. But those are often the places that need your influence the most. Comfort zones rarely require courage, but impact is often born in the uncomfortable. Trust that your purpose can work anywhere you are placed, and remember that your presence carries the potential to transform the space you enter. Being poured out also means being willing to be used up in service of your calling. Many people fear the idea of giving too much, of being emptied, of having nothing left. But salt does not fear being used up. It exists for that very reason. Your fulfillment comes not from preserving yourself for as long as possible, but from knowing that you spent your life doing what you were made to do. The people who make the greatest impact are often those who are willing to be fully expended for the sake of their purpose, trusting that their influence will outlive them. There is a deep satisfaction in knowing you did not stay in the container. When you choose to pour yourself out, you become part of something bigger than yourself. You become an agent of change, a preserver of truth, a bringer of life and flavor to places that had grown bland. You will begin to see the ripple effect of your influence, not because you chased recognition, but because you chose obedience to your design. Every time you release a part of yourself into the world, you plant seeds that will continue to grow long after you are gone. Ultimately, the salt in the container is a picture of untapped potential, and the salt poured out is a picture of purpose fulfilled. You were never created to remain untouched, unseen, and unused. You were created to impact, to preserve, to flavor, to change. The longer you keep yourself locked away, the more you rob the world of the difference you were meant to make. The curse of mediocrity thrives when people stay in the container, but it is broken when they are willing to be poured out, to give of themselves fully, to season the world with the essence of who they truly are. The moment you step out, the moment you make contact with the world, your purpose comes alive, and nothing can stop the effect it was designed to create. You were never created to live a tasteless, ordinary life. Just as salt was crafted with the power to preserve, to flavor, to transform, you were designed to bring change wherever you go. The curse of mediocrity has no authority over a person who knows their identity, guards their integrity, and pours themselves out without fear. Your uniqueness is not a mistake, it is your assignment. You are here to be distinct, to stand out, to season a generation that has grown bland with compromise. Do not hide in the safety of the container when the world is starving for the flavor you carry. Do not trade your essence for acceptance or your calling for comfort. Influence is your nature and purpose is your covenant. Let your life be a testimony of excellence, authenticity, and faithfulness. Preserve what is true, enhance what is good, and refuse to lose your savor. When history remembers you, let it be said that you were salt that never lost its flavor, a life that never settled for average, a voice that awakened the sleeping, a presence that shifted the atmosphere. Break the curse of mediocrity and live as the seasoning this world desperately needs, because only then will you fulfill the reason you were sent here,